If your team wins, I'll wear your jersey for a week. No complaints. But if my team wins..." Kylie left the sentence hanging in the air. Her lips curled into a smile that was equal parts mischief and genuine affection. She tapped a long, elegant finger on the spine of the old book resting on our coffee table. "If the Patriots win, you have to let me try a little magic. You have to live as a girl for 1 week. Deal?" "Chris." I laughed, a deep, booming sound that filled our small apartment. It was Super Bowl Sunday, an almost sacred holiday for us. The air was thick with the scent of buffalo wings and simmering tension. I was a die-hard Atlanta Falcons fan, born and bred. Kylie, a sharp and brilliant lawyer who had moved down from Boston, was an unapologetic, Tom Brady-worshipping New England Patriots devotee. Our annual wager was a tradition as vital as the game itself, but this year felt different. The difference was the book. It was bound in dark, cracked leather, the kind that looks like it has absorbed centuries of secrets. There was no title, only a series of faint, swirling symbols embossed on the cover. Kylie claimed it was a grimoire, passed down from a great-grandmother in Salem who, according to family lore, was more than just a bit eccentric. I'd always dismissed it as a quirky affectation, a prop for her playful personality. "Magic, seriously! Kai, you're going to turn me into a girl with your great-grandma's cookbook," I scoffed, grabbing another wing. "Don't mock what you don't understand," she said, her tone light but with an underlying seriousness I couldn't quite place. She opened the book, its pages yellowed and brittle. The text was handwritten in a looping, elegant script I recognized as Latin, interspersed with bizarre, beautiful illustrations of celestial charts and anatomical shifts. "Watch," she whispered. She leaned over a sad, drooping succulent on the windowsill that I had been meaning to throw out for weeks. Her finger traced a symbol in the book, and she murmured a few words under her breath. "Virens Renova." I was about to make another joke when I saw it. A faint, emerald light seemed to seep from her fingertip into the soil. The succulent, which had been a study in brown, defeated foliage, trembled before my eyes. One of its withered leaves plumped up, its color deepening from a sickly yellow to a vibrant green. It was a subtle, momentary pulse of life, but it was undeniably real. The laughter died in my throat. The atmosphere in the room shifted. The playful banter suddenly felt charged with a strange, exhilarating energy. It was a cocktail of disbelief, a flicker of fear, and a potent shot of pure adrenaline. I've always been a guy who loves a challenge, who pushes the envelope. My friends call me an adrenaline junkie. I call it living. And in that moment, seeing that plant twitch with impossible life, I felt the familiar pull of the unknown. I looked from the rejuvenated plant back to Kylie's sparkling eyes. She was waiting, an eyebrow arched in challenge. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a primal drumbeat of excitement. This wasn't just about football anymore. This was about stepping into a story, into a place where the rules I understood didn't apply. "You're on," I said, my voice huskier than usual. "If the Falcons choke, I'll do it. Whatever your witchy book says." I leaned forward, my competitive spirit roaring to life. "But when Matt Ryan hoists that trophy, you're not just wearing my jersey. You're going to be the most miserable Patriots fan in Atlanta." Kylie's smile widened, reaching her eyes. It was a breathtaking, knowing smile that made me feel like she had already won. "Oh, Chris," she said, her voice a low, melodic hum. "You have no idea." She closed the grimoire with a soft thud that seemed to seal our pact. As the pregame show blared on the television, the scent of chicken wings and the familiar comfort of our apartment faded into the background. All I could focus on was the weight of the bet we had just made. A wager that felt far heavier than a simple jersey. It felt like I had just bet a piece of myself, and for the first time. I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to win. The game began, and for a while, everything was beautifully, gloriously normal. The Falcons came out strong, their offense a well-oiled machine. When Devonta Freeman punched through the Patriots' defense for the first touchdown, I leaped from the couch, roaring with triumph. "Pay up, witchy woman!" I crowed, pointing a triumphant, sauce-stained finger at Kylie. She rolled her eyes, but the playful glint was still there. She picked up the grimoire, her expression one of mock seriousness. "All right, a deal's a deal. First score to you. You get the first adjustment." She flipped through the pages. "Let's see. Something simple." Her finger landed on a passage. She read the incantation aloud, her voice surprisingly steady and clear. "Vestimenta mutare. Be the team you hate." I expected a puff of smoke, a flash of light, something dramatic. Instead, nothing happened. I smirked. "See your—" I stopped, my words catching in my throat. Kylie was looking down at herself with a small, intrigued frown. The deep blue Patriots jersey she was wearing seemed to ripple, the fabric shifting as if it were liquid, the crisp white numbers and letters blurred, the colors swirling like paint in water. In a matter of seconds, the loose-fitting jersey tightened, hugging her curves. The sleeves receded, vanishing completely, and the hemline crept upward, shortening dramatically. The fabric reshaped itself into a ridiculously short, form-fitting navy blue dress, emblazoned not with the Patriots logo, but with the fierce, angular bird of the Atlanta Falcons. "Well, I'll be damned," Kylie said, tugging at the new hemline. "It's a little snug, don't you think?" I could only stare, my mind struggling to process what it had just seen. You really did it. You turned your jersey into a Falcons dress." "Rules are rules," she said with a shrug, though I could see the thrill dancing in her eyes. "My turn." Her turn came sooner than I liked. The Patriots, shaken but not broken, drove down the field and kicked a field goal. It wasn't a touchdown, but it was points on the board. 3 points for the Pats," Kylie declared, her voice filled with a predatory glee. She opened the book again, her finger tracing a different passage. "Let's start small. A little refinement." She looked at my hands, which were clenched into fists on my knees. "Manus transfigurare, lenis et clara." A strange tingling sensation shot through my fingertips, like the feeling of pins and needles when a limb falls asleep, but warmer, more invasive. I flexed my hands, trying to shake it off, but the feeling intensified, a bizarre energy buzzing just beneath the skin. I watched, horrified and mesmerized, as my hands began to change. The calluses on my palms, souvenirs from years of working on my car and lifting weights, seemed to melt away, the skin softening and smoothing out in real time. The scattering of dark hairs on my knuckles thinned, paled, and then vanished. My fingers felt like they were being stretched, pulled like taffy, elongating and slimming down until they looked delicate. The knuckles became less prominent, the shape of the hand itself losing its broad, capable sturdiness and taking on a narrower, more graceful form. But the nails were the worst part. I watched as my short, bluntly cut fingernails grew, pushing past the tips of my fingers in a silent, unnerving creep. They didn't just get longer, they reshaped, becoming more oval, a healthy pale pink bed showing through. "Kylie, what the hell?" I gasped, my voice cracking. I held up my hands. They didn't look like mine. They looked like a woman's hands. I tried to make a fist, but the feeling was all wrong. The grip felt weaker, the geometry of it foreign. The smooth skin felt alien against itself. Kylie just smiled. "I told you, magic." The second quarter was a nightmare painted in Patriots blue and red. A disastrous interception thrown by Matt Ryan was returned for a touchdown. As the commentator screamed, I felt a new wave of magic wash over me. This time, it was my legs. The tingling was more intense, spreading from my ankles up to my thighs, my sturdy, muscular legs, a point of pride, began to soften. The definition of my quads and calves blurred, the muscle mass seemingly dissolving and redistributing into a smoother, more curved shape. The coarse hair that covered my legs simply retreated into the skin, leaving behind an impossible, uniform smoothness, as if they'd just been meticulously shaved and lotioned. I instinctively reached down and touched my shin. The skin was silky, soft, and utterly foreign. When the Falcons scored again, I frantically yelled the first spell I could remember Kylie using, pointing a now slender finger at her. "Vestimenta mutare?" Her Falcon's dress flickered, and for a second I thought it would change back. But it only became a slightly darker shade of blue. Kylie chuckled. "Doesn't work twice on the same item, I guess. My great-grandma was thorough." Just before halftime, the Falcons managed to increase their lead to 21-3. But the damage was done. My initial bravado had evaporated, replaced by a cold knot of dread in my stomach. I was acutely aware of every sensation in my body. My hands felt too light, my legs too smooth. I kept wiggling my newly slender fingers, watching the unnervingly elegant movement. With every tick of the game clock, my own body felt less and less like my own. I was losing, not just the game, but myself. And the most terrifying part, a small, treacherous part of me was utterly captivated by it. The halftime show, a dazzling spectacle of lights and sound, was a blur. I barely registered it. All my focus was internal, a frantic inventory of the self I was losing. I sat stiffly on the couch, my strangely delicate hands resting on my unnervingly smooth legs. I tried to anchor myself with masculine thoughts, cars, power tools, the satisfying thud of a well-thrown football. But my own body was betraying me, distracting me with alien sensations. The third quarter began, and for a brief, beautiful moment, my hope surged. The Falcons scored another touchdown, pushing their lead to an incredible 28-3. It felt like an insurmountable gap. I let out a shaky breath of relief. Maybe this was it. Maybe the worst was over. "My turn," I said, my voice sounding thin. I didn't have the energy to gloat. "The book. Kylie?" She handed it over without a word. I fumbled with the pages, my long nails making the simple act clumsy. I found a passage with a diagram of a face and, without even trying to understand the Latin. Read it aloud. Vultus mollis. Sicut luna. Kylie touched her cheek. A subtle shimmer passed over her skin, and the faint lines around her eyes seemed to soften. She looked younger, more radiant. It was a pathetic, cosmetic spell compared to the fundamental changes she had wrought on me. And then, the comeback began. It started with a Patriots touchdown. A flicker. As James White crossed the goal line, a jolt went through me, sharp and strange. It wasn't a tingling this time. It was a deep, internal ache centered in my chest. I gasped and instinctively crossed my arms over my pecs, a sudden, protective gesture I'd never made in my life. A dull, tender throb started right behind my nipples. It felt like a bruise forming from the inside out. "Kylie, stop this," I pleaded, my voice barely a whisper. "This isn't funny anymore." "A bet's a bet, Chris," she said softly, but her eyes were fixed on the TV, her focus absolute. Next came a Patriots field goal. The ache in my chest intensified, swelling with a heavy, pulling sensation. I could feel the tissue beneath the skin beginning to swell, becoming firm and sensitive. My loose Falcons t-shirt suddenly felt tight, the fabric scraping against the exquisitely tender points on my chest. I couldn't stop touching them, probing the burgeoning mounds with my slender fingers, a mix of terror and disbelief coursing through me. My shoulders felt like they were being squeezed inward, the broad, powerful frame I had built over years in the gym seeming to narrow and shrink, forcing me into a smaller, more delicate posture. The fourth quarter was a relentless, methodical dismantling of everything I was. With every Patriots first down, I felt a shift. My hair, which I kept buzzed short, began to grow. I could feel it, a bizarre crawling sensation across my scalp. It tickled my ears, then the nape of my neck. I ran a hand through it and my fingers sank into silky strands that hadn't been there moments before. "No, please," I stammered, watching in horror as Tom Brady led his team down the field again. When Donta Hightower strip-sacked Matt Ryan, causing a fumble that the Patriots recovered. The change was seismic. A wave of heat washed through my entire body. A molten, transformative fire. My hips widened with an audible pop and a grinding sensation in my bones that made me cry out. My waist cinched, a phantom corset tightening around my midsection, creating a curve that was definitively, terrifyingly female. My center of gravity shifted, throwing me off balance. I felt my manhood, the very core of my identity as Chris, shrink and retract, an indescribable sensation of loss and hollowness that left me breathless. I was sobbing now, curled into a ball on the couch. "Please, Kylie, no more. I can't take it." Each successful pass, each yard gained by the Patriots, was a nail in the coffin of Chris. My facial features softened, my jawline losing its sharp angle, my brow bone smoothing out, my lips plumping. My Adam's apple dissolved in my throat, and when I tried to speak, the voice that emerged was a stranger's higher, softer, laced with a breathless panic. The final touchdown that tied the game 28-28 was the last major blow. The changes accelerated, finalizing. My rapidly growing hair cascaded past my shoulders, a curtain of light brown silk. The small, sensitive mounds on my chest blossomed into full, round breasts, their weight a shocking, permanent presence against my ribs. My body was no longer an altered version of my own. It was a completely new vessel. The game went into overtime. The Patriots won the coin toss. It was over. I knew it. As James White ran the ball in for the winning touchdown, Kylie stood up. She didn't cheer. She walked over to me, the grimoire in her hands. She looked down at the trembling, weeping girl I had become, and her expression was one of awe, not triumph. She whispered the final words, perfice mutatio. A brilliant, painless white light filled the room, erasing everything. For a moment, there was nothing but warmth and the sensation of becoming. When the light faded, I was lying on the couch, the transformation complete. The loose t-shirt and jeans I had been wearing were gone, replaced by a simple, elegant navy blue dress with the Patriots logo subtly embroidered on the chest. I pushed myself up, my movements clumsy and uncoordinated. I looked down at my body, the soft curves, the slender limbs, the undeniable shape of a woman. I brought a hand to my throat, feeling the smooth, unfamiliar skin. I looked at Kylie, my eyes wide with terror. I tried to say her name, but it came out as a broken, feminine sob. She knelt in front of me, her expression soft and unreadable. She gently brushed a strand of my new long hair away from my face. "Hello, Christina," she whispered. The first 2 days were a blur of denial and dysphoria. Christina spent most of the time wrapped in a duvet on the couch, a makeshift cocoon against a world that no longer made sense. My own body felt like a borrowed suit of clothes that didn't fit. Every movement was a study in wrongness. Walking felt strange. My new center of gravity and the subtle sway of my hips turning a simple trip to the bathroom into a precarious journey of rediscovery. The weight of my breasts was a constant, distracting pressure on my chest. The feeling of my long hair brushing against my shoulders sent shivers of revulsion down my spine. I refused to look in a mirror. The one time I accidentally caught my reflection in the dark screen of the television. A primal scream of no clawed its way up my new, higher-pitched throat. The face staring back at me was a complete stranger, pretty, with large, frightened brown eyes, soft features, and a cascade of hair that was the same light brown as mine had been. But that was the only familiar thing. It was the face of the girl who had stolen my life. Kylie was patient. She didn't push. She brought me food, which I barely touched. She spoke to me in a soft, calm voice, using my new name, a name that felt like a slap every time I heard it. "Christina, you need to eat something. Christina, do you want to talk?" I would just shake my head, pulling the duvet tighter, wishing I could disappear into its plush depths. The part of my mind that was still Chris was screaming, raging against the injustice of it all. This was a joke, a prank that had gone horribly, cosmically wrong, but the evidence was unavoidable. Every breath I took, every beat of my heart in this new chest, was a confirmation of the impossible reality. On the 3rd day, the doorbell rang. My heart leaped into my throat. "Who is it?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "It's just Mark," Kylie said, her voice calm. "He's dropping off the chili recipe I asked for." Mark, my best friend, my buddy since childhood, the guy I watched every game with, the one person besides Kylie who I could talk to about anything. A tidal wave of panic washed over me. "No, don't let him in. He can't see me like this," I hissed, clutching the duvet like a shield. Christina, calm down," Kylie said. putting a gentle hand on my shoulder. "It's fine. Just play along. Please." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "I'll say you're my cousin, visiting from out of town." Before I could protest further, she was at the door, opening it with a cheerful smile. "Mark, hey! Come on in." I could hear his familiar booming voice. "Hey, Kai! Man, what a game!" "Huh. Brutal. Is Chris around? I wanted to give him hell for it in person." I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. I wanted to run, to hide, but there was nowhere to go. "He's actually out running some errands," Kylie lied smoothly. "But I want you to meet my cousin, Christina. She's staying with us for a little while." Mark stepped into the living room. His eyes landed on me, huddled on the couch. I saw a flicker of surprise, then a warm, friendly smile spread across his face. "Oh, hey, nice to meet you. Christina, I'm Mark." I couldn't speak. I just stared at him, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and fear. This was Mark. He was looking right at me, at Chris, and seeing a stranger. A woman. "She's a little shy," Kylie supplied. "Saving me." "No worries," Mark said, his eyes lingering on me for a second longer than was comfortable. A strange warmth bloomed in my cheeks, a blush that felt utterly alien. He turned back to Kylie, handing her a piece of paper. "Anyway, here's that recipe. Tell Chris I'll catch him later. We've got to properly mourn the Falcon's epic collapse." He gave me one last smile. "It was really nice meeting you. Christina, you're very graceful." And then he was gone. The door clicked shut, and the silence he left behind was deafening. I slowly lowered the duvet. Graceful? He had called me graceful. A word no one in the history of the world would have ever used to describe Chris. And he hadn't suspected a thing. He'd looked at my face, my body, and accepted the fiction completely. For the first time in 3 days, I stood up and walked, not to the bathroom or the kitchen, but to the full-length mirror in our bedroom. I took a deep, shuddering breath and forced myself to look. The girl in the mirror was beautiful. There was no other word for it. She was slender but curved, with long legs and delicate shoulders. Her face was heart-shaped, dominated by those wide, expressive eyes. The long brown hair framed it perfectly. She looked sad and terrified, but undeniably pretty. A bizarre thought, unwelcome and powerful, surfaced in my mind. Mark thought I was pretty. The thought didn't disgust me. It intrigued me. A tiny, treacherous flicker of curiosity ignited in the pit of my stomach. My reflection's lips parted in a silent "oh" of surprise. I watched, fascinated, as I raised a slender hand and touched my own cheek. The skin was so soft. The next few days marked a shift. The raw panic began to recede, replaced by a reluctant, consuming curiosity. Kylie, sensing the change, gently began to guide me. "You can't live in my old sweatpants forever," she said one morning, holding up a simple sundress. "Let's just try it." The experience of dressing was a revelation. The feeling of the soft cotton dress sliding over my smooth skin, the way it swirled around my legs when I walked, the unfamiliar freedom of it, it was intoxicating. We moved on to other things. She showed me how to brush my long hair, the repetitive, soothing motion a strange comfort. She taught me the basics of makeup, her touch light and professional as she applied a bit of mascara, a touch of lip gloss. "There," she said, holding up a small mirror. See, it just highlights what's already there. The face looking back at me was still a stranger's, but she looked less frightened. She looked hopeful. Each new feminine ritual chipped away at the frantic, cornered identity of Chris and laid a new brick in the foundation of Christina. Learning to walk in a pair of low heels was an exercise in frustration and focus, forcing me to be aware of my body in a way I never had been before. I had to think about posture, balance, the placement of each step. Chris had just moved. Christina had to glide. It wasn't a surrender. It was an exploration. I was a stranger in a foreign land, and I was finally starting to learn the language. And with every new word I learned, the urge to return home became just a little bit weaker. On the 6th night, Kylie came home from work and found me not on the couch, but standing in front of the open closet, a thoughtful frown on my face. I was holding 2 dresses, one a simple black sheath, the other a floral A-line. The internal debate was surprisingly intense. "Big plans?" she asked, a gentle smile in her voice. I jumped, startled. "Oh, no, I was just looking." "Good," she said, walking over and placing her briefcase on the bed. "Because I'm taking you out to dinner." My stomach did a nervous flip. Outside where people can see me. The bubble of my curiosity had been safe within the confines of our apartment. The real world was another matter entirely. "Yes, out," she confirmed. "To that little Italian place we both love. It's time. Christina, you can't hide forever." An hour later, I was staring at my reflection, my heart hammering against my ribs. Kylie had helped me with my hair, pinning it up in a soft, elegant twist. I was wearing the black dress, a pair of her heels, and just enough makeup to give me a confidence I didn't feel. The girl in the mirror looked poised, calm, and impossibly adult. She looked nothing like the terrified creature wrapped in a duvet from a few days ago. She looked like a woman on her way to dinner. The walk to the restaurant was an ordeal. Every footstep in the heels felt precarious. I was convinced every person we passed was staring at me, that they could somehow see through the magical disguise and spot the terrified man cowering underneath. But no one did. Men glanced at me, their eyes appreciative. Women offered small, friendly smiles. I was just another woman in the city, and the anonymity was both terrifying and liberating. The restaurant was warm and inviting, filled with the low murmur of conversation and the clinking of glasses. The host smiled warmly. "A table for 2 ladies." "Yes, please," Kylie answered, and the casual, normal phrase sent another jolt through me. 2 ladies. Under the soft, golden light of the restaurant, sitting across the table from Kylie, I felt the world tilt on its axis again. Our dynamic had always been one of playful competition, of witty banter and intellectual sparring, but tonight, it was different. She wasn't my rival or my victorious tormentor. She was my confidant, my guide. The way she looked at me wasn't triumphant. It was something else. Something softer, more complex. "You look beautiful, you know," she said quietly, after we had ordered. The compliment landed differently than Mark's had. Coming from him, it was a shock. An external validation that had cracked my denial. Coming from Kylie, it felt intimate, personal. A blush, now a familiar sensation, crept up my neck. "Thank you," I managed to say. my voice barely a whisper. I looked down at my hands, now adorned with a coat of clear polish she had insisted on. They looked so natural resting on the white tablecloth. You made this happen. The magic made it happen, she corrected gently. I just read the words. You're the one living it. We talked for hours, not about football or work or any of the usual Chris and Kylie topics. We talked about this, about how it felt. I found myself confessing things I hadn't even admitted to myself. I told her about the phantom weight of my old muscles, the constant surprise of my softer voice, the bewildering experience of feeling emotions that were sharper, more immediate. I explained the strange comfort I found in the simple, repetitive act of brushing my long hair. I admitted that a part of me, a part I was ashamed of, had been thrilled when Mark hadn't recognized me. I feel fragile, I confessed, swirling the wine in my glass. Like Chris was this solid, stone thing. He knew who he was. Christina. She feels like glass. Like one wrong move and she'll shatter. But she can also see the light in a way he couldn't. Kylie listened, her chin resting on her hand, her eyes never leaving my face. She didn't judge or mock. She just understood. Maybe being glass isn't a weakness, she suggested softly. Maybe it just means you're more transparent, more honest. Walking home. A comfortable silence settled between us. The city lights seemed brighter, the night air softer, for the first time. I didn't feel like I was in a costume. The dress didn't feel like a disguise, and the heels no longer felt like stilts. They just felt like my clothes. Back in the apartment, I went straight to the bedroom mirror. I stared at my reflection, at Christina. The makeup was slightly smudged. A few strands of hair had escaped the elegant twist, but she didn't look shattered. She looked real. The memory of Chris, his rough hands, his deep voice, his easy confidence, felt like a photograph from a past life, a life that was no longer mine. I touched the smooth skin of my cheek, then the gentle curve of my hip through the black fabric. My mind was quiet. The raging voice of Chris, the one that had been screaming in protest for days, was silent. All that was left was a quiet, profound question that seemed to emanate from the very core of this new being. Is this really me? I whispered to the girl in the glass. She didn't answer, but for the first time, her eyes held not fear, but a deep and unwavering serenity. The last day of the week arrived with the quiet finality of a Sunday morning. The air was still, filtered through the blinds in soft, hazy stripes across the bedroom floor. I woke up slowly, gradually becoming aware of my body, the gentle weight of my breasts, the curve of my waist against the sheets, the tickle of long hair on my neck. Sensations that had once been alien and alarming were now simply the way things were. They were the baseline of my existence. Kylie was already awake, sitting in the living room with the grimoire open on her lap. It was placed conspicuously on the coffee table. A silent arbiter of my fate. She looked up as I entered, her expression unreadable. Good morning, Christina. Morning, I replied, my voice soft. I walked to the kitchen and began the morning ritual that had become my own over the past week, making coffee. My movements were fluid and natural, no longer the clumsy, hesitant gestures of the first few days. I knew how to navigate this body now. I knew its rhythms, its balance. The wager ends tonight, Kylie said from the other room, her voice steady. "At midnight. The book says the spell will break, unless the subject willingly chooses to make it permanent." My hand paused on the coffee pot. My heart gave a single, hard thud. "What does that mean, willingly chooses?" "It means," she said, appearing in the kitchen doorway, "that if you want to go back, you don't have to do anything. Just let the clock strike 12, and you'll be Chris again. But if you want to stay as you are, you have to say it. You have to tell the magic you want to stay." She looked me directly in the eyes. "The choice is yours, and yours alone. I won't influence you." The day passed in a strange, suspended quiet. We didn't talk much. Every tick of the clock was a countdown. I spent the hours in a daze, drifting through the apartment like a ghost, touching familiar objects that now felt different. I ran my slender fingers over the rough grain of my old leather armchair, trying to remember what it felt like to sit in it as a man. I picked up a football from the corner, its weight feeling awkward and oversized in my smaller hands. Memories of Chris flooded my mind, not with anger or panic anymore, but with a kind of gentle, wistful nostalgia. I remembered the feeling of physical strength, the easy camaraderie with my male friends, the simple, uncomplicated confidence of moving through the world as a man. I remembered the satisfaction of fixing an engine, the grunt of effort when lifting something heavy, the deep timbre of my own laughter. It was a good life, a complete life. But then, my gaze would fall on my reflection in a window, and I would see Christina. I remembered the thrill of Mark's innocent compliment, the unexpected camaraderie with Kylie during our girl talk, the sheer sensory pleasure of a soft dress against my skin. I remembered the feeling of walking down the street and being seen not as a threat or a competitor, but as something to be appreciated, even protected. I remembered the emotional transparency I'd discovered, the feeling of being glass fragile. Yes, but also clear and bright. This was also a good life, a different, complete life. Who was I? Was I the man I had been for 28 years, or the woman I had been for 7 days? Was my identity defined by a lifetime of history, or by the profound, undeniable truth of my present experience? As evening fell, the tension in the apartment became almost unbearable. Kylie made a simple dinner, but neither of us ate much. At 11:30 p.m., we were sitting on the couch, the grimoire on the table between us, the clock on the cable box glowing with malevolent red numbers. 11:45. I thought about my job, my friends, my family. How could I explain this? How could Chris just disappear? The logistical nightmare was overwhelming. 11:55. I thought about waking up tomorrow, waking up with a coarse jawline, with broad shoulders, with hands that felt clumsy and foreign after a week of delicacy. The thought sent a surprising pang of loss through me. I didn't want to lose this softness, this grace. 11:58. Kylie reached out and placed her hand over mine. Her touch was warm, comforting. "Whatever you choose," she whispered. "It's okay." 11:59. My gaze was locked on the clock. 60 seconds. I felt my breath catch in my throat. My entire life, both of them, seemed to flash before my eyes. The roar of a stadium, the scent of motor oil, the feeling of a crisp autumn day, the swish of a skirt, the scent of Kylie's perfume, the vulnerability and beauty of a heartfelt conversation under soft lights. 2 sets of memories, 2 sets of sensations, 1 heart beating frantically in a chest that was waiting for a verdict. The clock ticked over 12:00. The room was silent. The air didn't shimmer. No light flashed. Nothing happened. I looked down at my hands, still intertwined with Kylie's. They were the same. Slender, soft, with neatly shaped nails. I slowly raised my free hand to my hair, feeling the long, silky strands. I was still me. I was still Christina. Kylie's breath hitched. You didn't change back. A slow smile spread across my face. It felt small, fragile, and yet more genuine than any smile Chris had ever given. It was a smile of quiet revelation, of peaceful acceptance. It wasn't a choice made in a single, dramatic moment. The choice had already been made, gradually. Over 100 small moments throughout the week, in a blush, in the swirl of a dress, in the shared confidence over a glass of wine. I didn't need to speak the words aloud to the magic. My heart had already spoken them for me. I looked at Kylie, my eyes clear and calm. The question of who I was had finally been answered. "No," I said, my voice soft but sure. "I didn't." The grimoire lay closed on the table, its purpose served. Outside, the city hummed with life, indifferent to the quiet miracle that had just occurred in our small apartment for the first time. I wasn't Chris trapped in a woman's body. I was just Christina, home,